Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, issues on classroom backlog and shortage of teachers continue to hound learners on the first week of school opening. A lawmaker questions the readiness of the Education Department to run the pilot testing of a decongested curriculum. And the Education Department says reverting the class opening to June unlikely for the next school year. Senate Committee on Basic Education Chairman Senator Gatchalian joins us in the studio live. So millions of students returned to classrooms this week, but the same old problems persisted. The Education Department says the allocation in the proposed 2024 budget will not be enough to solve the projected classroom shortage for school year 2024 to 2025, which is estimated to reach nearly 400 billion pesos. The department was encouraged to explore the expansion of its tuition subsidy program to help public school learners transfer to private schools. DepEd was also urged to fix its process of hiring teachers. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Senate Committee on Basic Education Chairperson, Senator Gatchalian. Thank you so much for being here again. Good to see you again.
Thank you
so walang pasok.
Yes, no classes today because of the weather.
Dalawang araw na, Senator,
Yes,
walang
yes.
pasok. On the first week of classes, hindi siguro talaga ito maiiwasan. Ano?
Yeah, hindi maiwasan yan because of our school calendar.
Yeah.
And even if you move the school calendar to the original one, meaning the summer break is during April and May, you'll experience the same. No? So what's important here is we fulfill the 220 days of school calendar. So meaning they can push it back later on, you know, because it's mandated by law that students should complete 220 days of school.
So, because we talked about that, I'm going to jump in already in this with this issue on reverting the school calendar back to the summer months will be April and May. Ano po? Are you for that? Because it's already been said that it may take about it's not as easy as we think, and it may take a couple of years.
Correct.
But that's the point also that you're making.
Yeah.
Whether we moved it or not, tatamaan pa rin tong rainy season.
Correct.
And we still need to fulfill the 220 days. So, should we or should we not?
Admittedly, there are pros and cons. And in fact, during the hearing, we invited Pag-asa, and Pag-asa made a very good presentation of the pros and cons. These are the facts. No? The summers are getting hotter. And based on their trend, they say in some areas in the country, some of the schools, some of the provinces hit about 50 degrees Celsius during the summer times.
Heat index siguro
Heat index, heat index. The rainy season, rainfall is getting heavier. And it's also very intense at a very short time. No? So there are pros and cons. But my point why I am in favor of reverting back to the original school calendar is because of the development of a child. No? Our children needs to play. They need to spend time with family. They need to go outdoors. They need to see nature. They need to go to different parts of the country. And you can only do that during the summer. During rainy season like this, you're trapped inside your homes. So you cannot do anything but just watch TV. And that's not good for the development of a child.
So, Senator, kalimutan na po natin yung balik natin dito dahil mainit o balik natin dito dahil maulan, dahil tatamaan talaga yung school year.
Tama.
What for you is important? Summer needs to be enjoyed by the kids mentally, physically, emotionally. Para bang ganon?
I think we've now experienced both. No? I think both of us grew up in that summer break setup.
And that was always something we look forward to.
We always look forward to. We spend time with our families. In fact, some of our children, like in my case, I take extracurricular activities during the summer. But now you cannot do that. You cannot go outdoors. You cannot play basketball outdoors. You cannot play football outdoors because it's raining. So now we can compare, actually. And what I've observed right now in our setup is the extracurricular activities disappeared because they cannot do anything because it's rainy season, bumabaha, and it's
And importante talaga yun sa bata.
yeah, and
To
it's
anyone.
and we can compare, no, and you can see that our children are trapped inside their home. My pamangkins are trapped inside
Yeah.
their homes because they cannot go out, and that sense of development, that development portion, the social development portion of our children disappeared because of this setup.
So, should it or would it really take 3 years?
Yeah.
Ganun ho talaga.
Well, if you
Totoo
think
yun.
about it, to revert it abruptly, there's 1 year that the breaks will disappear. No, you have to cut that
will be
break
reduced.
and
Yeah.
then go back to the original calendar. And you don't want to do that as well. So you need to gradually transition. But in my opinion, it will not take 5 years. I think if we are going to do it, probably 2, maximum of 3 years, we can go back to the original calendar.
Okay, Chairman of Basic Education, first week of opening of classes, watching the news, getting feedback. What's your assessment so far?
There are two things that you should look at. No, in the rural areas, I think it's much more smoother in terms of classroom size, in terms of facilities, in terms of opening of classes. In the urban centers, this is where the problem comes in. Especially like, for example, in Valenzuela. I noticed that in some of our senior high school levels, we have 60 students per classroom, we have 50 students per classroom. I saw in the news in Quezon City, it's the same. So in urban areas, we're experiencing really congested classrooms. And with this congestion, you also have problems in terms of conduciveness in teaching. So we need to address the urban problems of congestion.
But hasn't that not been a problem for a while now? So the question, how do you really address that? Because I want to go, of course, to the backlog a little later on. Because it doesn't take a month, dapat kasi may foresight talaga dito sa dami ng mga papasok. But anyway, for now, must we live with this in the urbanized areas that there are 60 students, even in the city of Valenzuela, as you were saying?
Yeah, it's much more complex because migration happens in the urban areas. People from the province, they come here to work, they bring their children, they bring their families. The population growth rate student population growth rate in urban areas is much higher. It's about 5 to 6% compared to the national average of 4%. And at the same time, land is very expensive, Pinky. You cannot buy land here. You're competing with condominium developers in terms of land value. So it's much more complex. That's why I offered and suggested to DepEd, let's think outside of the box. And if you look at the private school enrollment, it actually dipped by 16% pre-pandemic level. So they have excess capacity. And let's use that excess capacity. In fact, our private schools are offering their classrooms at cost so that they can just use the classroom. They'll have some revenue to pay for expenses. And that's why I suggested, let's expand the voucher system because it makes sense. You address congestion, you don't have time, you limit the time of build or no more time to build, and you help the private schools pay for their operating expenses.
So how is the state of this school voucher?
In fairness to government, it expanded it. No? We're actually at about 52 billion now in terms of voucher and the education service contracting. No? Conceptually, they're the same. No? So there's 52 billion now being allocated to public school students to go to private schools. But I think we can still expand it. No? And that's why I told DepEd, let's come up with a economic analysis. What's cheaper, to build classrooms or to use voucher system and use the excess capacity? And based on our analysis, it's obviously cheaper to just use the excess capacity because you eliminate the time to build classroom and you use their available classrooms.
And there's no land, as you mentioned.
Yes.
In fact, it's perfect that you're here because Congressman Roman Romulo, who's also the chairperson in the House, was saying the problem here in NCR or urbanized areas is wala na talagang lupa.
Yeah,
and you can only build so high. Hanggang a certain level ka lang. Okay, so backlog. 159,000
Correct.
classrooms.
This is only for new classrooms, not including repairs.
Yeah.
and not including those that are because of wear and tear.
Okay,
They're
but-
just growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this, to be fair, this has been an accumulation from previous years.
Yeah.
Every year, you know, every administration, every DepEd secretary would want to address this. But the budget next year is supposed to be 15 billion pesos, equivalent to 6,421 classrooms. 159,000 backlogs. So matitira pa rin yan, mga 153,000. Is there some sort of formula? Are we lacking in foresight to be able to para punan itong backlog?
I think the Vice President put it aptly in one of her interviews. I heard it. She said it's a quicksand, no? Because you have calamities, you have natural corrosion because our country is an archipelagic country, so we have natural corrosion of our classrooms. So every year you have a few thousand classrooms destroyed because of typhoons, a few thousand classrooms destroyed because of corrosion, a natural phenomena, and you have growth of our students. So these three reasons are the reasons why we are always in a perennial state of lack of classrooms. Now, we don't allocate the whole 400. No? For 2024, we're only allocating about 40 billion. So a tenth of what we need. No? And because of that, obviously papatong ulit, no? Because we're not fulfilling the all 400 billion, and then you still have growth, you have damages. So it will again increase, the lack of classroom will again increase. So it's a cycle. No? That's why, again, I suggested to DepEd, let's think outside of the box. Let's use the excess capacities for now. Maybe private schools are willing to build more as long as they're assured of student enrollment. Let's look at that angle also, because we can never catch up. And I think this is about time to look at other solutions such as private sector involvement in order to fulfill those lack of classrooms.
So at least that's already admitting the obvious that we can't catch up.
It's difficult, yeah. It's
okay,
difficult.
but if we can't catch up, aside from the school vouchers, you're saying yes, think out of the box. Must there be a commitment from government yearly to be able to build, you know, a certain percentage, sir, hindi man number a certain percentage of the backlog para lang kahit papano hindi ganun katindi yung gap o yung backlog?
Yeah. Traditionally, they've been trying to hit at least 10%.
Okay.
So the numbers will fluctuate between 20 to 40 billion, more or less. So I think internally, the target of DepEd is to allocate 10% of what is required. And historically, that's been the number. But again, 10%, but next year you'll add another 5%, and then you'll add another 5%. So it's piling up.
Yeah.
It's piling up.
So, should it be increased?
Actually,
wag na isipin yung 10%, gawin na at least 15, 18?
the best case scenario should be the case, increase the budget.
Yeah.
That's why, to be honest, Pinky, I salute our teachers and principals, because in urban areas, they innovated. Now we have 2 shifts, 3 shifts. Here in Quezon City and in urban areas, they have 3 shifts just to accommodate everyone. No? So, yes, we need to increase the 10% to much more.
Okay.
No?
Quick question before we go on a break. Yung 2 shifts ho ba and 3 shifts, pareho pa rin ba yung teacher doon?
No,
Hindi,
iba.
okay.
Because under the Magna Carta, they're only allowed to teach 6 hours.
I see.
So after 6 hours, a different set of teachers.
Hence, we need more teachers.
Hence, we need more teachers.
And there was a statement from you saying that the hiring process actually takes about 7 months. We're
Yeah.
going to talk about that after the break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Senator Gatchalian. So you were saying that the hiring process, so that's something, well, I learned, no, that the teachers under the Magna Carta should only teach 6 hours maximum. So if there are 2 or 3 shifts, you need more teachers. And you already said in a previous interview that the hiring process of teachers need to be fixed. Facts that you brought out, there are 30,000 unfilled positions in ano ho ba
In
yan,
the
sir?
budget.
In the budget.
Yeah.
And kalahati po nito, 10 to 15,000 ay mga guro?
Yes, more
okay,
or less.
bakit ho ang number one, ang hirap mag-hire, and why does it take 7 months to hire?
This had been a perennial problem of DepEd. I remember asking the previous secretary about this, and the explanation is the hiring of teachers go through a lot of process. No? For example, it goes to the division, it goes to the region, then it goes to the central, and it goes to the CSC, which is outside of DepEd. And apparently they have, the papers go to other agencies that they do not have any control of.
What other agencies?
Like the Civil Service Commission, I think some other agencies, no, I was made to understand. And so our simple suggestion is, why don't you talk to the other agencies and shorten it? Because we need the teachers tomorrow. No? So we need that.
No, we need the teachers yesterday.
Yesterday. So, I think they're trying their best to improve it. This time around, with the budget, on Monday we will hear the DepEd budgets again, and this will be another topic that we will be asking. Have you improved the process? Because in terms of budget, the money is allocated, but we're not hiring fast enough. We're hiring, but we're not hiring fast enough. Therefore, we're not fulfilling all the required teachers in our schools.
And would you like to get to the bottom of this as soon as possible during Monday's?
Yes, definitely.
hearing?
Again, this has been a conversation for a long time, and there should be a solution already yesterday.
Yeah.
No? So,
yeah.
we'll see.
10
Sayang
to
talaga.
15,000 ang dami nun.
Sayang talaga. In fact, in this budget, I think that is still a problem, no? When we were reviewing the budget for Monday.
What about teacher salaries?
Yeah.
Paano ho yun? The state of our teachers now.
Yeah. In our study, no, here in ASEAN, we're actually one of the lowest in terms of teacher salary. Our entry level is about 27,000, 28,000. But let's say, compare ourselves to Vietnam, it's about 35,000, 40,000. Of course, if you compare ourselves to Singapore, it's about 60,000. No? So we're one of the lowest here in ASEAN. So there's logic to increase the entry-level salary of our teachers. I actually proposed to increase it from salary grade 11 to all the way to salary grade 13, 14, which is about 32,000, 35,000 more or less. But we also need to balance this, Pinky, because our private schools, their salary for their teachers is also not so high because they compete.
But is it higher than public schools?
It's almost the same.
Okay.
It's almost the same. But they're competing with one another. No? They're competing with one another. So we also need to be sensitive that our private schools will need to catch up. They'll need to catch up, but their enrollment is going down. So we need to also balance that angle.
What was the logic behind the low enrollment in private schools?
Because of the pandemic. We saw the trend because of the pandemic. Still, a lot of our kababayans have not yet gone back to their original financial state pre-pandemic level. Maybe, I think the OFWs, some of our
so it's financial considerations.
Financial
basically.
consideration.
Okay.
Public school enrollment has gone up to about 6-7%. So we saw transfers from private school to public schools.
I see.
So, and we saw that happening during the pandemic, 2020.
Okay. Senator, I'll go back to what you said. You want that salary grade 11 to possibly 13, 14, which means to us from 27,000. So we understand
about 32, 35.
to 35. Is this really possible?
It's a budgetary question, but I'm just laying down the rationale why. Because our peers in ASEAN is much higher than us, and we're considered a fast-growing nation. And on top of that, Pinky, and I've seen this phenomena happening, our teachers are being poached by our neighbors, not to teach in schools, but to teach English. So I've heard stories, no, anecdotal lang naman to, but I've heard stories. Our teachers being poached, let's say, to Shanghai, to Beijing, being hired as nannies, but also dual to teach English. Because obviously China wants to be a global player and they want their kids to learn how to speak English.
Shouldn't we learn from the nurse situation or our healthcare worker situation and arrest it before it actually happens?
Yeah. In fact, I was talking to Mr. George Barcelon, the PCCI president, and in fact, he was telling me, that our teachers are being poached to the United States because some of the counties are experiencing lack of teachers, and the only logical place to hire teachers is from the Philippines because we can speak English fluently. So we're now competing not only with our private schools, not only with ourselves, but also with other countries.
So how do you plan to
that's why there's
arrest this situation?
Yeah, that's why I failed the bill, no, to increase it. Not the whole lot, no, but at least make it competitive around our regional peers, so that we can arrest the poaching of our neighbors and retain good teachers in our country.
Kahit naman po yung from 11 to 14, pwede namang 11
pwede pa, no? In
to
fact,
12, 11 to 13, di ba?
Daming proposals, no? There's 11 to 16, 11, but mine is just enough lang to retain our teachers.
Something realistic.
Something realistic. Also, we have to look at the budgetary consideration rin.
Ang daming kailangan puntahan ng budget. Quickly, before we go on a break, the confidential funds for the DepEd, is this something you're in favor? Is it something you support? Or do you plan to question this because in the House, hindi po sila napagbigyan magtanong hinggil dito? Again, the logic would be, bakit di na lang lagay sa ibang mga bagay? Puro na lang tayo, kailangan natin ng pera sa classroom, sa teachers, etc.
Pinky, the confidential funds is an executive prerogative. If they see it's necessary, no? I heard the Vice President mention that peace and order, drugs, security in our school is a perennial problem. When I was a mayor, I experienced that also. So it's an executive prerogative. But the Senate and Congress should perform its check and balance role. And I was advised by the Senate that these documents are already submitted to the Senate. So the Senate plans to convene the oversight on confidential funds, and we will look at this accordingly.
And I think it's Attorney Poa, the spokesperson, who in one, I think, interview, I think in the House hearing, he said that they have been complying with the submission of the quarterly reports. Quarterly ho ba dapat yung report sa oversight committee? But you guys never looked into this yet.
We're going to look at it, no? Because it's already been 1 year. So we're going to look at it. I was advised by the Senate that we will already convene the oversight on confidential funds.
It's really 1 year later. Kasi if they give it to you every quarter, can't you look at it after every quarter, sir?
Well, we timed it because it's a budget season. So we will look at the spending of that confidential funds, but we're not isolating only for DepEd. This is the entire bureaucracy. You know? We're talking about different agencies as well. So we're going to determine whether it's judiciously used, whether next year will be there's logic to put it again next year, and just in time for the budget, because the budget is the time to tweak all of these things.
All right. Again, another break. We'll be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Senator Gatchalian. Senator, K-10, it will be piloted in about 30 schools this year in about 6 regions. Sabi po ni Congressman Romulo, I want to know if you agree, sana ginawa na to ASAP kasi kailangan na ayusin yung learning capability ng mga estudyante ngayon. What do you think?
I agree with him. This K-10 curriculum has been a long time coming. I remember we conducted the hearing 4 years ago, and there was already a talk of revising our K-10 curriculum because of congestion. And we talked about it, I think, last interview. And I also mentioned that if you look at the dropout rates, there's a high dropout rate from grade 1 to grade 3 of about 30% to 40%. No? So in other words, before reaching grade 3, grade 4, 30% of our students have already gone out of the system. And my analysis of that is because our curriculum is so congested, a lot of our children fail, a lot of our children get frustrated, and they don't enter school anymore. No? What happened, they drop out, and then later on, maybe when they reach 12, 13, 14, they go back using ALS. No? But ALS is not a complete or holistic approach. No? You still have to go through the normal basic education because it's a holistic development. No? So we don't want that to happen. No? And that's why I agree that that curriculum should be implemented as quick as possible. But I also acknowledge constraints. Like, for example, in our hearing, teacher training. They will need a lot of time to train our teachers with the new curriculum. Number 2, printing of textbooks. Believe it or not, from day one of drafting the new textbook all the way to delivery takes about 1.5 years. No? That's how long we can deliver textbooks. No?
Because of the sheer number, is
Because
that
of
it?
the sheer number, because of the procurement law, because of the logistics. That's why, again, we suggested, let's think out of the box. Let's give vouchers lang to the students and let them go to National Bookstore or to whatever bookstore and buy textbooks. That's how private schools are doing it.
Yeah.
Instead of printing and give it to our
because
students.
there's stringent rules that need to be followed with the procurement law,
But in
etc.
private schools kasi, they don't give us our books. We buy our own
We
books.
do.
They
We
only
did.
prescribe what books.
Yeah.
So, kanya-kanyang bili. Why not do that in our public schools?
So you've always said this. Now you need to start thinking out of the box, and this is urgent. These need to be addressed as soon as possible. Is there a way to push government agencies at DepEd to be able to implement strategies to be able to address the issue as soon as possible?
We keep on pushing. Our job is to conduct oversight, keep on pushing, analyze all of these things, come up with recommendations. And in fairness, there are a lot of changes. For example, the curriculum. Although I do agree with Congressman Roman that sana ginawa na kaagad, no? Because of that decongestion, we're seeing dropouts, no? And we can only arrest that dropouts if we decongest and launch the new curriculum.
All right.
Yeah.
Again, we've run out of time. I wish we had more time, but we'll follow the hearing on the DepEd budget and see, and maybe it's a good time again to see you in a couple of weeks or a month, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gatchalian. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.